Okay, everybody, I'm back jumping in on this return on investment, and this is now about relationships, okay? So, when we think about, I'm just going to use an example to kind of just set the tone. So, I have my own list of ideal characteristics that I want in a man, and then I have my ideal characteristics that I want in myself. And if I look at those lists side by side, and I go, okay, I'm still working on this one here. So, that's like a work in progress on me. And this guy that I just had a date with, he looks like he doesn't have this category resolved yet. It looks like he's working on that one, but he has all these others. So, again, it's that whole idea that sometimes some things are completed and then other things are going to be a work in progress because, we are all human and we're all traveling this journey called Earth. We're going through the motions as they come up and as the Lord leads us to our lessons and understanding. So, bottom line, I have my ideal characteristic list of the type of man that I want to have in my life. And when I, look at that list, again, there are certain things on that list that are non-negotiable. Like, for example, someone who's in active addiction, that's non-negotiable. Like, if you're in active addiction, I'm not dating you, period. Okay? That's just not something that I want to fool with. If you're smoking and you're in a process of attempting to quit, then okay, maybe we have something to talk about. However, I don't want to live my entire lifetime with someone who's a smoker. Again, I'm sharing with you, these are some boundaries, deal breakers. I'm just explaining a couple ideas just so you understand the concept, okay? And then on a guy's list, he might have on there, I only want to date blondes, okay? So the fact that I'm a blonde, that's great, and I fit into that category if somebody was trying to choose a blonde. However, if I had red hair, I could be the nicest person on that guy's list, and I could have all the different characteristics. But if he doesn't like redheads, then it's a no-brainer, because if he doesn't want to look at you and he's not attracted to red hair, then okay, it's like all the other characteristics don't matter. So I'm trying to give you I have a no-brainer, a deal breaker, and then somebody else, the guy was going to have his deal breakers. Okay. So bottom line, two people get together, they go out on a date, and on some level, they're cross-referencing their ideal characteristics. Okay. And we're talking about a healthy relationship here. So if I'm looking at my list and I'm going, hey, I'm good at marketing and communication, but I'm not so good with some of this heavy duty tech stuff. I really need somebody that understands the tech stuff. And man, that would be great if I met somebody that understood the tech stuff, that I wouldn't have to deal with that portion of what I'm dealing with, and they could deal with that portion. That would be like a super help to me, right? And, vice versa. If somebody has tech skills, but they don't really have any graphic design or the desire to be a promotion person, and they find out that I do that, and they're like, wow, if we teamed up and we were doing ministry work, man, that would be so great that, you could do this promotion, advertising, selecting photo stuff, which I'm really terrible at, and, I could do your tech stuff, and I'm just saying, sometimes when you start to talk about what your visions are and the kind of things that you want to do with yourself in your life, and you're dating someone, these kind of conversations are going to possibly come up. And then you might start to do something on a trial basis and say, hey, I have this, music gig I'm doing. Is there any chance you could throw together a flyer for me and take some headshots? And I could give an example and do that. And he could see that, wow, I have some skills there, right? And then I could say, hey, I really need to do this technical iCloud thing with the photos and I'm not getting it and I don't know what I'm not understanding. Is there any way that you could help me do this task because I'm getting this weird error code? And again, when somebody does something again and shows their skill level that they know how to do something, what happens is this is where trust begins to build. And so I'm going, oh wow, I needed this tech solution and he provided this tech solution. And he's going, hey, I needed this promotion solution and she provided this promotion solution. Wow, that actually worked out really well. Maybe we could do other projects together, okay? And sometimes that's how a relationship can form, on a level of like helping one another out in areas that I may be weak in and somebody else may be strong in, and vice versa. So when somebody demonstrates their abilities and they, get you to understand that, hey, they have this talent, you have then an expectation, and a reasonable expectation, that they probably could duplicate that again. And they probably could help you on a similar project. If that problem persisted and came up, they probably could help you again. And so that is where that relationship gets built on, hey, I have this other gig to do and I was wondering, could you take a different photograph of me? Maybe we could do one outside, and could you help me put some flyers together so I could hand them out? And then I'm going, we fixed that iCloud thing, but now I've got this weird server error code and I don't know what that means. Could you help me figure out this server error code thing? So again, that's a way that it could show up and kind of manifest, right? In the sense of it just like I had a need, he had a need, we helped each other with those needs, and then there can be created a trust where that if something like that happens, you can help somebody in that area. So bottom line, when someone is acting in their integrity and they're demonstrating that they have follow through and that they're going to complete something, then that's where, trust is built, because each person is going, wow, I had this thing that came up and, that person was able to help me complete that project on time. And, it really turned out great. And I'm really grateful for their ability and their skill set to be able to help me complete something that I couldn't have completed on my own with my own skill set. Okay. And whether you call that teamwork or, when there's two or more, this is like the beginning stages. And when you think about having a life partner and someone that you want to spend your life with, it's a good thing to be practicing some of these things before you tie the knot, because you want to make sure that this person is going to be there for you in these different arenas that show up. So the other part that I think that most people discovered during this whole COVID time was, can I lean on my partner when it comes to medical problems that may come up? And the fact that we were all living in this big question mark and the unknown of not knowing what COVID was and where it was going to take us and how it was going to constrain our living. And in that whole time, the whole mask wearing and the, not being able to do this and that and restrictions. And the point is, whenever we had to enter into a medical environment, it seemed that everything was even more heightened and that there was more fear around it and there was more hype around it. And again, the fact that when we weren't allowed to be with our loved ones, if they were in a critical condition, or even just going to the hospital, it was like, you're not allowed to come in, you have to wait in your car, they'll text you or whatever. I mean, it was just a totally different paradigm of what we were living in. And again, during this period, this is when, I was put to the test of all of these medical problems were what my fiance had. And he was like, again, using these medical problems as a bonding tool an emotional trauma bonding tool, and victimization. So this is an example of taking things in an unhealthy way. So just so that we're clear and understanding an example of how this can be manipulated, in his case, what he was doing was he was using a cover story. And his cover story was that he had narcolepsy and that he could fall asleep at any moment. And he had this prior car accident, and he had all these injuries and pain from this prior car accident. And he had asthma, and he needed an inhaler to, activate his breathing capacity. And, he had a wrist injury, and so he needed to take it easy, and he couldn't do this and that because of this injury. So what I'm getting at is, when you first listen to these things, you're like, oh, poor you. Like, I'm so sorry you're feeling that. Is there anything I can do to help you with your discomfort? Would you like another pillow? If you got a different set of strings, would that help your guitar playing and make it easier on your wrists? All of these things became, a topic of conversation. Like, how can I assist you better so that you can deal with all of these, current injuries and current problems that are bothering you? And I think that when we have compassion for someone, whether it's cancer or a car accident or, a wrist injury in this case, that there's a level of, I'm going to help you in any way that I can, and be your friend, be your nurse, and assist you so that you get well quickly, right? And I think that all of us would agree that we would love to have someone in our life that's compassionate and loving and generous with their time, and would give rides so that they can get to the doctor's appointment if they're not allowed to drive because their wrist is injured and they can't drive because their sleep condition, they could fall asleep at any moment and cause an accident. So you look at all these variables and you're like, oh my gosh, that's really hardship. Like, you poor thing, right? And that's the avenue that he had presented his story, and that's how I was taking it. I was taking it like, oh my gosh, you're my life partner. I trust you, and we've built up this time together, and of course I'll take you to your doctor's appointment. Of course, let's figure out how we can do this together in unity, right? I'm gonna be there for you, right? And the point is, this was a cover story for the real truth, which was hidden. And the truth that was hidden was that there was no clean and sober recovery in Narcotics Anonymous. Was there that for 31 years? I think the answer is a big no. Because people that have really truly surrendered and have a solid, recovery program, they don't act like an immature person that's in their first year of recovery. They're going to have their shit squared away, and they're going to be a responsible adult if they have multiple years of recovery. So the bottom line is, this whole thing of the narcolepsy and what he would do with that is that all of a sudden he would just fall asleep, sitting, standing, laying down, whatever. And so he could be on the toilet and fall asleep. He could be standing up and fall asleep. And he had painted this picture that this disease, this narcolepsy problem, was the culprit. And so this could happen at any time, and that he needed my assistance and he needed my help, because at any time this could happen to him and he could be stranded somewhere, and I need to be on alert. So he's like, I need you to be 24/7 accessible to me, because this could happen at any time. And I'm coming from it from a compassionate medical perspective, like, oh my God, Eric, yes, of course I'll help you in any way that I can, right? But the reality was, this cover story of narcolepsy was to hide the fact that he was a heroin addict and he was using multiple different types of drug combinations, and that he, the whole heroin on the nod, which I had never heard of before because I truly had no understanding or personal experience with any of that. And so this whole heroin on the nod thing is where like somebody is like sitting or standing and they just like kind of crawl and fall over, and it looks very similar to what somebody who has narcolepsy would be doing. Okay, so the whole point is his whole entire story was concocted on a lie and on manipulation. And so as I thought there was truly a medical condition, there really was not a medical condition. It was him using a medical condition diagnosis as a cover story to hide the fact that he was truly a heroin addict. And the whole entire time that we were together, he was doing drugs. But I didn't know he was doing drugs because he had a backup method and an excuse for everything. So if his eyes were being bloodshot or pinned, he was using different, eye potions to change the visibility of his eyes. If he was always complaining that his stomach was upset and that he ate something funny. But the reality was he was detoxing from the drugs, and that was one of the side effects, was constipation from all the Percocets and Oxycontins that he was doing that I had no idea until after he died and I saw all the evidence. So what I'm saying is that this whole picture of a person who I fell in love with, who was demonstrating a certain level of integrity and a certain level of follow through and a certain level of, I'm your man, I've got your back. He did all that to impress me so that I would believe that he really was for real and that he could do these things that he said that he could do because of his skill set and because of his abilities to do what he said he could do. But the reality is, if you're high and if you're on drugs, you're not going to be able to consistently maintain. You're just not going to be able to. And so what I would see is I would see him being able to maintain for a bit, and then I would see him fail. And I would be like, something's not right with your medication. You need better sleep medication. And he's like, you're right, baby. It's not working. And meanwhile, it wasn't working because he was doing heroin. Okay. His recovery program wasn't working because he wasn't working a recovery program, and his sponsor, who was doing his best to, be of service to him. How could a sponsor truly be of service to an addict in active addiction if the addict in active addiction is lying the entire time and not coming clean to say, hey man, I still have a problem? He was Eric was in total denial that he was even using. And the reality was, I'm watching his weight fluctuate and I'm going, something's not right. And he's like, I think it's the food that we ate. And I'm like, Eric, I ate the same food that you ate and I'm okay. So again, it's that whole thing of story concoction upon story concoction, and everything was to create this facade that this is who he is, okay? And I share the details of this with the hope that maybe you can see in my story the holes and the leaks so that you yourself can unhook yourself from an unhealthy relationship, because you're probably witnessing some similar behavior and similar, verbal abuse and similar just witnessing and observing that if you are finding things like this, that there's a very good chance that your mate is not okay and that they could be in active addiction. So as I continue to continue with, in this relationship, it wasn't until, and again, I would question things when he seemed off, and I would call his sponsor and challenge his sponsor to dive deep into whatever it seemed like he was avoiding. Okay. So I did the best that I could with the resources that I had and the observation skills that I had to be able, like, something's not right. But the reality is, I can't cure him. I can't control him. And I didn't cause Eric to be a drug addict. He did that on his own, okay? And he continued to choose it on his own. And, you know, I could make statements and be loving and supportive in the way that I could. And the entire time while all this was going on, I was being told the entire time, I'm fine. You're overreacting. You know, like, I'm just tired. You know, my wrist hurts because, you know, I injured it. You know, I just need to rest. You know, but the whole point is, if you're constantly resting and you're not working and you're not producing and you're not creating any fruits of the spirit, then you're letting down your partner. You're violating the agreements that you made. And if you're not coming clean and saying, hey, I can't do this because I'm actually struggling with drug addiction, then nobody can really help you if you're not coming clean with the fact that you're struggling, okay? And all the lies and denial prolonged everything because he was unwilling to admit that he had a problem. Now, when I personally, and I mean physically with my own eyes, okay, saw him snort off of my dryer in my laundry room, you know, that was it for me. I saw him do it with my own eyes. There was no story that he could concoct that could explain why he did what he did, because he snorted something off of the dryer. And he had already been warned previously that, you know, you don't crush up pills and snort them. You take them orally as your doctor prescribes, you know, oral medication. And so it's like, to see that, I was like, you know, I have 2 words for you. Get out. Now, again, you have to understand, it was my apartment. It wasn't an apartment that we got together and that, you know, it was my apartment and my head was on the axe. The axe is on my head because everything was under my name. And when I added him to it, there was a whole list of rules that he had to comply with. And if he did not comply with those rules, then I would be kicked out as well. So the point is, of course, I needed to honor what the rules and regulations and agreements were, or I would have been homeless. So the point is, when I saw him do the drugs, for me, that was the door closing, you know. That was me saying, you know, for where you are right now, this is not okay. Because now the awareness is you lied. And all my suspicions and, you know, like sensing like something is off, that just confirmed that my intuition was right on and that there really was something off with him because he was using drugs. Now, at that point, I laid down the rules again, and he came back to me, of course, with all these apologies. And at that point, I was like, okay, let's talk about what the consequences are to your behavior. Here's your signature. These are the documents that you signed and agreed to, that you understood. You violated the lease agreement. You violated the relationship agreement. You violated, you know, all of these things. Therefore, there's consequences. And I said, so when you come here, be prepared to have a truck or whatever to pick up your stuff because, you know, you no longer live here. Now, again, to him, being a VIP musician that got away with everything all the time and nobody held him to any kind of accountability, he thought that this was a joke. He thought that I wasn't being serious. He thought that he could just manipulate his way back in. But when he got to the door and he saw that all his stuff was already packed up in boxes outside and bags with a running list of all the items, he quickly realized that I was not a joke. and that there were consequences for his behavior. And he had to get whatever help he had to get the stuff. And he was very angry and annoyed. And my response was, this is called life. And if you want to play in a drug den with whores and dum-dums, then you're not going to live in a nice place. You're going to live in an abandonmenium that doesn't have electricity, where you shit in a bag. I said, that's your choice. And I said, but if you want to live with a mature woman who's an adult, who has certain levels of morals and standards and expectations, who makes agreements and has business contracts, and if you violate things, there are consequences. I said, this is the result of dealing with a mature, responsible person. I said, so you made your choice. Here's the consequence. So he wasn't too happy about it, and he eventually got his stuff somewhere, and then he made the phone call. And then with the phone call, he apologized, and he owned up to what he had done that round. He had made amends. He made a list of the things that he could remember of what he violated financially and emotionally, and what nasty things he said to me and about me and to whom. And he fessed up for what part he did wrong. Now, whether that was in coercion or, support, teamwork with his sponsor, or whether it was, I'm taking my jacket off, it's really got hot now, or whether he came up with that on his own, I don't know. But what I do know is that he was given the rules, he was told what the consequences were, and then when he did what he did, and he violated, he didn't like the consequences, he wanted to figure out a way to hurry up and get back to where he was. And what I demonstrated to him was, you can't come back into an environment that you were kicked out of. You're no longer welcome. You're homeless. And he was blaming all of that on me. And I was saying to him, look, I'm the one that's paying rent. I'm the one that's keeping my agreements. This is my place. I have paid for all the investments of all the things, like the sofa and the tables and the kitchen appliances and all those things that run a household. I'm like, I'm the one that made the investment in those things so that I can enjoy the satisfaction of having a household that runs smoothly. And I said, and if you would like the benefit of that, then you need to show up as a mature human, a mature man. And I said, and it appears as though the drugs have led you astray. And for that, I feel bad for you. But until you can prove to me that you're a mature adult, the engagement is there, but we're not living together. We're not, going to be making agreements until you can resolve and make amends to the things that you have already done wrong, because there's no trust right now. You broke all the trust. And, he would try his crying match with me. And I would listen, and I would say, you know what, Eric? Jesus wept. It's one of my favorite lines in the Bible. Jesus wept. So enjoy your weeping. Like, really sit in the bullshit that you did and the impact of what you did to me, what you did to my family, what you did to your family, all the consequences, the financial loss and the ruin, your reputation loss and ruin. I'm like, you did that to yourself. You're the only one that did it. I said, and the only person you can blame is you. And I'm like, there's consequences for everything. And I said, now here's what I will offer you. And I said, right now, you need a friend. And a sober one at that. And I said, I'm clean and sober, Eric. I'm not an addict. So I'm happy to be your friend. If you need to call somebody, you need to reason things out, I'll be here on the end of the phone. Whatever the hour, as best as to my ability. But I'm human too. I need to sleep and eat and take care of myself and do what I need to do and run my business. But if I can be of assistance, I will help you along your journey. But you need to work your 12-step program with a sponsor. You need to get into a treatment center. You need to get into a recovery house. You need to get your life on track. And the only person that can do it is you. So go to a 12-step meeting and start. Get back in there, And his response to me was, you really do love me. Because I was really awful to you. And he's like, I haven't even told you about, the infidelity. I said, Eric, I'm smart enough to know that sex go along with drugs. I said, so I'm assuming that you did stupid shit. And I said, which is why I'm not having any intimacy with you. Period. And the only time that I will is when I'm married. Because this is a very good example of why it doesn't pan out well when you're dealing with someone who doesn't have respect. And, he felt remorseful and I would think, okay, he's really working the steps and he really is, caring and whatever. And I'd see him get better. Okay. And so if I look at something in our story, I would say that I had hope. I really had hope. I had hope that some God-ordained thing was going to happen and that he was really going to surrender and that he could really overcome this, because I saw other people in NA who really were clean and sober for multiple years. And I thought, it's possible, but he has to want it bad enough and he needs to really surrender. But the thing is that in his particular case, he really didn't get to that place. He pretended that he did, but the reality is he did not. And although it's a sad outcome, okay, and again, I look at what I started with in this discussion about return on investment, and I look at it now and I say, you know what? On paper, Eric looked like a good investment. Financially, he's showing me all these, documents of bank accounts and how much money he has. He's showing me he owns this really big RV. He's showing me that he's got all these gigs lined up and all these clients and all these options, and that he has a loft in New York City, and that he's got all these instruments, but they're in these storage lockers, and he's having trouble because of the drama with his family. And the point is, he had a story, okay, and on paper a lot of it looked real, convincing, and I did what I could to help him, okay? And I encouraged him to repair and mend the brokenness with his family. But I couldn't do it for him. He had to do it for himself. And I don't know what he said behind closed doors when I wasn't around. I only know what I know, and that's it. Now, if I look at it now, and like I said, on paper, Eric looked like a good investment. And all his skills with being a musician and a radio engineer and an IT expert and a IRS tax preparer and, a vegan chef and a great communicator and a good public speaker at NA meetings. And, he appeared as though he was a really great bro, like he had your back. He was funny, insanely talented, the most amazing conversationalist that I've ever met in my entire life. And here's the bottom line. He was a wounded soul that lost his way and could never get back up. And even though he wanted to, he didn't achieve it. And I really thought that I had, the good Eric. But the reality is, I think I had the negative, bad Eric more than I had the good Eric. But I just didn't see it because there were so many things that were hidden and uncovered until after he died. And after he died, I then discovered the truth that he had been hiding from me. And obviously all of this has affected my grief, but here's the bottom line. Eric was a bad investment in terms of a relationship. And I can say that now. I couldn't 2 years ago because I didn't know 2 years ago what I know now from all the things that I have found and the evidence where he was really being a violent, malicious, horrible human. And when you read and see certain things somebody has said about you, and this is the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with, and this is how they're handling adversity and life challenges, man, it's really sad when somebody is making a call on your life, okay? And the point is, I don't know drug industry, because I'm not a druggie. I don't understand drug talk or things that go over my head because I'm not in it. I don't know what secret language they're talking about because honestly, I don't care, okay? If a drug person is going to be a drug person, that's what they're choosing. It's a choice. And the facade of the manipulation with the drug use and the narcissism and the womanizing and the porn and the infidelity. The point is, when you look at all that now with the truth of really who he was as a person, if I look at those ideal characteristics from the beginning, I was like, I want all these things in a person. And I thought I had them in him. But then I look at what really happened and what those real truth characteristics really were. He was a liar. He was a cheater. He was a thief. He was a womanizer. And, what does the devil do? The devil comes to lie, kill, steal, and destroy. And that's exactly what Eric did. He destroyed what I had built. He destroyed my business and my finances. And he did it under such a manipulative story and cover that he was taking care of me. And I believed it. So, my friends, I invite you to get a heavier dose of discernment and to really maybe rewatch this and listen to it a couple times so that you can really see the type and the pattern of how manipulators act and what they do, and so that you can avoid this type of thing happening to you. And if you're already in it, my friends, I pray for you that the God of my understanding will help you to find an exit strategy and to really start living back in the joy of the Lord and to get out of living in a grave. Because honestly, when I think back to how I was living in joy before Eric, and then while I was with him, how my life slowly, without me noticing, turned into me living in a grave. And my life as I knew it was completely taken from me without me even realizing it, because I became a taxi cab driver and a nurse and, like a promotions agent. It's just, I was doing so many things for him, and my own life was falling apart. And it was all out of this urgency because he was ill. You get what I'm saying? And it's sad. It truly is sad. And I pray for those who are still stuck in this. And it is a disease, but I think it's a choice that when you really get on your knees and you really surrender to God through Jesus at the cross and the death, burial, resurrection, ascension, and you really get that, I think that's when the Holy Spirit comes in, because you really have truly surrendered. And when the Holy Spirit comes in, your life as an addict is not going to look like an addict anymore. Because you're not going to be an addict. You're going to be a person in recovery. And a person in recovery, their life is going to look so drastically different than a person in addiction. So I leave off here. Have a good night, everybody.